Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and I mean the middle of nowhere, with a 2022 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. This is the maxed out, highest spec 4Runner. It stickers for $53,000 to start, but of course, you can't get them for that price these days because everyone wants a 4Runner. Why do they want a 4Runner is the real question. It's a totally outdated platform, body on frame SUV, but that's what people love about it. So I want to show you everything the TRD Pro can do off-road and do a little bit of on-road driving to show you where it is sort of outdated these days compared to more modern SUVs. So let's get in there and take it for a spin, but first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thanks. Inside, it's pretty roomy here. I don't even have the seat all the way down or back. I actually prefer to have it up a little bit because there's a big square hood that I want to see over while I'm off-roading. Right now we're on a pretty smooth graded gravel road, so I've just got it in 4 high. Let's get moving. So we got to get the basics out of the way first, I guess. It's got a 4.0 liter V6, 270 horsepower, 278 pound-feet of torque. And that sounds all right for a truck that weighs around 4,700 pounds, but it's got a 5-speed automatic, and that's really the main shortcoming of the 4Runner in this generation. Coming up to some little bumps here, I'll keep it in 4 high. It's not really a huge deal because it's got plenty of low-end torque. That 278 pound-feet must come on pretty early. It's got hydraulic power steering, which is pretty nice because it's got good feel on-road, and off-road it's not too terribly tough to steer, so you're not reaching the end of the day all exhausted. We're coming into a little bit more rock here. Now you're steering Nitto Terra Grappler all-terrain tires. This is a Toyota TRD Pro 4Runner, so you might expect mud terrains, but those Nittos do really well on the pavement. They're not too loud, they don't howl. They're 265 millimeters wide all around, and they're 31.6 inches tall, which is tall for a 31 or small for a 32. Either way, they do pretty great, and I'm not even aired down. They're around 38 to 40 PSI right now, depending on how hot it gets outside, which it's going to get very hot today. I could probably air down and even get a smoother ride here, a little more grip, but it's doing just fine, and I haven't hit anything super technical yet, so I don't really need to. Plus, airing down would reduce my ground clearance, and I'm kind of surprised at how little ground clearance there is. Now, of course, it's got that aluminum front skid that goes under the engine, and it's got a skid for the transfer case too, but it's not super high off the ground like I would expect from my, for example, 1998 Mitsubishi Montero, which has the same size 31.6 inch tires, a little narrower, but if I were to get new tires on it, I would probably go to 265 was my next plan. I'm not really bottoming out because I'm choosing a specific line to avoid any big boulders, but if you had this thing, you might want to step up to 33 or even 35 inch tires. I don't know if 35s will fit in the wheel well. You might get some rub, you might need a lift, but at the very least, if you're starting to talk about lifting this thing, the TRD Pro does not have a very important feature that the TRD Off-Road, a lower spec, cheaper 4Runner, does come equipped with. And that's Toyota's KDSS suspension system, which includes sort of fake disconnecting sway bars front and rear. Now, they're not real disconnecting sway bars like Jeep's Rubicons or the new Broncos, but they're actually kind of a cool system. The sway bar is here, and instead of brackets connecting it to the subframe, there's 2 arms. One is rigid and one is a piston that can firm up for on-road driving and then soften up and allow that sway bar to articulate more. Probably a bigger deal for the front suspension, but you can see I'm sort of going like this, and this is a moderately smooth road. So I would have expected that feature to make its way to the TRD Pro. Then again, it's harder to lift a 4Runner if it has the KDSS with the sway bars, because that system requires more finesse. You might have to drop your subframe or put spacers in or something. So if you wanted to do this thing with 35s, then it's a little easier than the TRD Off-Road. Now, stepping up to 35s on the TRD Pro is gonna stress the transmission which is kind of sluggish anyways, and really reduce your power by a fair amount, 10-15% at the wheels because of that increased tire diameter. Which brings up something that a lot of people like to do, which is a Magnuson supercharger for this 4.0 liter V6. Magnuson claims that on this engine you can get up to 335 horsepower with that supercharger. It costs $6,000 though. And so that brings us straight to the 4Runner TRD Pro pricing. This thing starts at $53,000. I've seen used ones from 2021 with 10,000 miles on them going for 65. Now you get nice leather seats. The steering wheel is nice and leather. You get a touchscreen, which is hilarious because the $100,000 Lexus LC500 and RCF Fuji Speedway Edition that I recently drove don't even have a touchscreen, and this 4Runner does. But it's not a particularly premium interior. I do like this material on the dash. You get a little carbon fiber, but check out my other video of a full walk around and walk through of this TRD Pro to learn a little bit more about how Toyota specs this exact model. For now, I want to show you some off-roading, and right on cue, it looks like we're coming up to a little bit more of a rocky technical section that I don't think your Subaru Forester would want to go through. But you can see this is getting a little bumpy. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera quite so much because it never really does, but the suspension system does pretty well, even without the disconnecting or fake disconnecting sway bars. There are Fox 2.5-inch shocks all around. They're piggyback shocks at the rear because you've got a solid rear axle, and they do a pretty good job of damping both on-road and off. You can sort of cruise, you can sort of go fast on little washboards, and it's pretty smooth. And then this is a rocky road and I'm not aired down, and it's just doing just fine. I'm using my brakes here and I'm in 4 high, but I could be in 4 low and using crawl control. However, I will show you that in a minute. The crawl control system that Toyota installed in this, trying to sort of keep up with the competition, is not great. And I would prefer to just have it in 4 low if we were going down something real steep, and use the brakes and use the shifter, because you can pop the shifter over into manual mode and shift down into second, even first, or shift up as you want. And that's what I've been doing more when I get into some tougher stuff. To get into 4 low, just as an example, you have to pop into neutral. Well, first you have to pop over out of manual shift mode, then up to neutral, and then it's got a transfer case with a manual shift lever, and you just shift it right over. It's very smooth. So here's a nice little rocky, steepish section. Again, don't know how well that's going to show up on camera. So let's see what that crawl control setting is really like. In neutral, pop it into 4 low, back into drive. Let's turn crawl control on and turn the speed to 3 out of 5. Let's see how it goes. You can hear the brakes activating to slow you down. It's sort of like the locking differential fake system that the Porsche Cayenne has. It takes a little getting used to. It doesn't use the engine quite so much. So why don't we shift it over into manual mode? It had us in 4th gear. That's not really ideal for crawl control. You would think that that would be down in 1st gear. So let's see if that allows the brakes to stop gripping quite so much. It does not. You can hear it. It's lurching. It's going slow down this little section, and we're skidding out a little bit there, but it's not a pleasant system. You can hear that. I don't like that at all. Honestly, I think I'd be better off just manipulating the brakes myself, so I'm gonna turn that off, but I wanted to show it to you. I knew I didn't like it anyways. We'll stay in 4 low just to keep things flowing here as we head up this sort of steep section here. Now in my Mitsubishi Montero, I just basically have to always keep it in 4 low if I'm off-roading and it's hot outside. The cooling system is the failure point of that vehicle, and keeping it in 4 low allows the fluids to circulate faster because of the higher revs and the water pump and oil pump moving faster. People seem to think that that's actually putting more strain on the engine, and it would seem like that's the case. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's what I just have to do in that truck. In this one, I've been driving different temperatures from 70 degrees to 113 yesterday, and the coolant always perfectly flat. Whether that's an idiot gauge and just always stays flat until it's overheating, I don't know. But I've been impressed because it's real hot out here sometimes. Anyways, I'm just gonna keep cruising in drive in 4 low because it'll shift up into 4th and 5th gear happily. Right now it's already in 4th and we're just cruising down the road. There are, of course, certain situations where you want to put it into manual shift mode, but right now isn't one of them because this is a pretty well-maintained Forest Service road. Clean roads like this are perfect for the 4Runner TRD Pro, but when it does start getting a little bit gnarlier, I wish I had bigger tires. I wish that I had rock sliders, for example, instead of just the skid plate. I wish the skid plate was steel. A $53,000 car gets you aluminum, but aluminum dents a lot easier, a little bit less hardcore for when you're really going to be bouncing off some rocks. Then again, if you're taking your 4Runner that's brand new and that you paid a bunch over sticker on and you're really bouncing it off rocks, more power to you. Here's a nice little dip area where we can see some of the articulation. I'm not going to go right in there, I'm going to go this way. But you love having that solid rear axle. So many vehicles these days are independent front and rear suspension, as is my Cayenne, and it does great. But it's just a lot smoother having the solid rear axle like the Montero. Again, it's not quite as much articulation, admittedly, as Jeep's with the solid front axle, but the on-road driving dynamics of this thing with a solid front axle would probably be pretty miserable. Now, as outdated as the 4Runner feels in some ways, in other ways it's great because it's just a rugged truck that you can beat on. At the very least, Toyota did add Apple CarPlay, which I love, and allows me to pull up Onyx off-road. Great, because I've never been in this area before I arrived. And that touchscreen does also have a trail view camera here. The image quality is really bad, so it's pretty much pointless. At least it's there if you were really coming over something steep though. CarPlay is great. Using Onyx on CarPlay is even better than using Onyx on your phone. And so at the very least, I can have my Waze up when I'm on the highway cruising, keeping an eye out for cops, can have my music playing, and when I'm on the trail, I've got Onyx. All in, the sound system is kind of mediocre. The innate tech is just fine, not great, not bad. It's funny that, again, it just blows my mind that the 4Runner has a nicer infotainment system than those Lexuses. Lexi, shall we call them. Here's a nice little steep part that's also bumpy, and you can see I'm sort of jostling a little bit, but for what the road is, those Fox shocks do a real good job. Again, after driving the Bronco Raptor and then this, I go home and I start shopping for reservoir shocks for my Montero. I think that they would make a huge difference on that thing. But more importantly, it needs to be re-geared so it can go over 80 miles an hour. And it needs the AC charge so that I can off-road in comfort without worrying about the engine overheating. And that's sort of the advantage of a Toyota like this. It's new, but it's got that old world flavor. It's new and reliable, and it's got a warranty. But it's sort of just a continuation of the kind of rugged capability that the 4Runner of the 90s and the Montero of the 90s really encapsulate and makes them so valuable for off-roaders today. Well, you pay the Toyota tax to get your classic Toyota. Monteros are starting to go up in price, but they're still nowhere near a third-gen 4Runner, that's for sure. Now here we are, it's smoothing out, speed up, hit the brakes. We got four-wheel disc brakes. It doesn't have drums like the 2022 Tacoma, which is one of the funniest things I've discovered while researching a vehicle in a long time. The 2022 Toyota Tacoma still has rear drum brakes. The 4Runner has discs at all four wheels, and the brakes are actually super good. With shocks this soft, if you slam on the brakes, it'll actually nosedive pretty hard. Whoop! We got a little ABS action there. It's a good brake system. and I'm pretty impressed. So on my way home, I found a nice little area that I love to test out off-road vehicles. It's just got some little washed out ruts in the dirt, and it's a good place to check out articulation and camber as we come down and then back up this little trail. I've got it in 4 high, so let's see how this 4Runner TRD Pro does. Purposefully put the tire down in there a little bit. See how it goes. I mean, these are some pretty good bumps, and it's just cruising down through here. No problem, but I'm gonna go up on the right here because it's like real deep in there. I think we got one wheel off the ground there, but like pretty flat for a vehicle with no disconnecting sway bars. That's not bad. Now let's turn around and go back up that same route and see how this thing does going up the hill, struggling with a little bit of not quite sand, not quite gravel traction. This section is even a little bit bumpy in here too. There must have been a washout lately. I must have missed a storm. But again, it's pretty smooth. This is it's impressive. We're not on that sort of choppy rock stuff from earlier, but this is probably a little bit more slippery. I can feel a little bit of slip as I'm trying to turn around here. That's because I've got the steering wheel totally cranked over as much as humanly possible. I'll be curious whether I want to lock the rear differential going up this. It looks actually a little bit too hairy in the middle where sometimes I've gone from the washout storm that maybe came through. But we're going to go around the sort of easier side just as a test. Here we go, coming up on right here where the ruts start. Put the right wheel down in there. Start to get some tilt, and then it just lifts right up. I can feel the traction control kicking in a little bit, but not too much. Yeah. Heard the skid plate a little, but just on some dirt, not really on some rocks there. Again, just no problem. It comes up that with absolute ease, which is testament to the balance of this chassis, independent front suspension, solid rear axle, and really goes to show why people still love the 4Runner today. After all, as off-roading vehicles get more and more complex with really electronic features like disconnecting sway bars and traction control and adaptive sway bars that change the pressure based on the terrain, throttle response, there is still something to be said for keeping things simple and reliable. And that's sort of the selling point of the 4Runner. If you want something simple and reliable that feels like it's from a different age with some modern creature comforts, this is really the only option on the market. Now, if the TRD Pro is the high maxed out trim you want to get, that's your choice. But I might go for the TRD Off-Road. I really need to test one of those out and see if that added little bit of complexity is worth it. Still, I can't wait to see what Toyota does with the next 4Runner, because they want to keep the DNA alive, but also bring it into the modern age before we get to just fully electric vehicles. Check out more on HotCars to see what we're thinking might come for the next generation 4Runner. And in the meantime, before you sign off, as always, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us out. Thanks.